I don't even know where to start. Maybe with the sound of her laugh, the one that used to fill every corner of the house, even when I was too tired to pay attention. Or maybe with the way she looked at me during the early years, as if I was the only man alive who could protect her from the world. It's strange how a single look, a single sound, can burn itself into your soul and then later haunt you like a cruel echo. I guess I should start by telling you about her. Her name was Claire. She wasn't perfect, though I thought she was. She had this restless energy, like she was always waiting for something bigger, something beyond what she had. That made her exciting, magnetic, but also dangerous, though I didn't see it at the time. Or maybe I refused to. We met when I was in my late 20s, working long hours at a job that didn't feed my soul but kept the bills paid. She was younger, full of fire, full of dreams that seemed limitless. When she looked at me, she saw stability, safety, a man who would ground her when the world spun too fast. And when I looked at her, I saw everything I thought I was missing: passion, beauty, a reason to wake up and keep pushing forward. For years, we built what I thought was a good life. We bought a small house on the edge of town, one with a porch where we'd sit late into the night, drinking cheap wine and talking about all the places we'd go someday. That someday kept moving further away as life pulled us into routines, responsibilities, and the quiet compromises of adulthood. At first, I didn't notice the changes. The way she'd stare off during conversations as if she wasn't really there. The way her phone became a constant companion, clutched in her hand like a lifeline. I told myself it was just stress, just the modern world pulling at her attention. But deep down, in that quiet part of a man's heart, where truths whisper before they scream, I felt the shift. It started small, almost invisible. She'd go out with friends and come home later than she used to. She'd change her clothes before meeting them, always a little more effort than seemed necessary. I told myself not to be paranoid. I trusted her. God, I trusted her. I wanted to be the kind of man who didn't hover, who didn't question every move. But then there were the silences. The moments when I'd ask about her night and she'd give me answers that were too quick, too polished, like lines rehearsed in her head. Her laugh still filled the house, but now it didn't always reach her eyes when she looked at me. The first time I really felt the ground shift beneath me was one evening in late summer. She was in the kitchen, cooking dinner, her phone face down on the counter. I wasn't suspicious. I just reached for it when it buzzed, thinking it might be one of her friends needing directions or something harmless. But when I picked it up, the screen lit up with a name I didn't recognize. Ethan. The text preview was short. Can't stop thinking about last night. I froze. It felt like my lungs had collapsed, like the air had been stolen from the room. I put the phone down before she noticed, my hands trembling so hard I almost dropped it. She turned around just then, smiling like nothing was wrong, asking me to taste the sauce on the stove. And I did. I put the spoon to my lips and nodded, pretending everything was fine, while inside me, something cracked open and began to bleed. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay beside her, listening to her even breaths, staring into the dark. Every memory of us replayed in my head, twisted now by that single message. Was it new? Was it a mistake? Was there more? I wanted to wake her up, shake her, demand the truth. But I didn't. I was paralyzed by fear. Fear of hearing the answer I already knew. The days after that were a blur of suspicion and denial. I started noticing things I'd ignored before. The way she guarded her phone, the way she'd smile at texts she wouldn't show me, the way she seemed both closer to me in small bursts and miles away the rest of the time. I caught myself studying her, memorizing her every gesture, trying to decode whether she was still mine or already someone else's. I told myself I'd catch her, that I needed proof. But the truth was, I already felt betrayed, even without hard evidence. Every time she walked out the door, a piece of me followed, torn between trust and the gnawing certainty that I was losing her. The fracture had begun, and once something cracks, no matter how much you try to hide it, you can't unsee it. I didn't know it then, but the message from Ethan was only the first drop before the flood, and the flood was coming for everything I thought I had: my marriage, my sense of self, the very ground I stood on. The days after that night were unbearable. I tried to act normal, but every movement, every glance, every little sound from her phone made my stomach twist. I became hyper aware of everything. The way she left her car unlocked, how she checked messages quickly when I walked into a room, the subtle changes in her tone. My mind was constantly racing, searching for clues, piecing together a story I didn't want to believe but couldn't escape. I started following her, not out of curiosity, not for fun, but because I needed answers. One evening when she said she was going to meet a friend, I drove behind her at a distance, my pulse hammering in my chest. She didn't go to the cafe she claimed. She parked behind a dimly lit bar on the other side of town. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight I thought they would cramp. Then he appeared. Ethan, a man I had never seen before. Tall, confident, with a smirk that made my stomach sink. She walked toward him and smiled, a smile I hadn't seen in months. It wasn't the playful, loving smile I remembered. It was the kind of smile that belonged to someone else, someone I wasn't part of. I stayed in the car, watching them talk, laughing softly, leaning close. Part of me wanted to explode through the door, grab her, demand an explanation. But another part, the quieter, more controlled part, told me to wait, to watch, to let the truth settle in fully. I watched for almost an hour until they went inside the bar. My chest felt like it was being pressed by a vice. I wanted to leave, to forget, to pretend I hadn't seen anything. But the images wouldn't leave. Her hair brushing his shoulder, the way she laughed at things I wasn't part of, the subtle intimacy of gestures I hadn't seen directed at me in months. At home, I paced the living room like a caged animal. Every familiar corner of the house suddenly felt foreign. The smell of her perfume, once comforting, now made me want to retch. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. My own reflection in the hallway mirror seemed like a stranger, eyes wide and haunted. I wanted confrontation. I wanted answers. But deep down, I knew there was no simple explanation. Her betrayal wasn't a single event. It was a slow erosion. Months of half-truths, of little lies that accumulated like poison. And now I was standing in the middle of the aftermath. I tried talking to her that night. I asked if she'd been honest with me, if there was anything I needed to know. She smiled at me, hugged me even, and said everything was fine. Her words sounded sincere, but her eyes were empty. And in that emptiness, I saw the full scope of what I had lost. By the end of the week, I had decided I needed to know everything. No more guesses, no more denials. I started keeping careful notes, recording small details, piecing together her schedule, watching patterns emerge. Every lie, every slip, every trace of her hidden life was recorded in my mind. And with each piece, my anger and hurt grew, sharpened by the precision of certainty. I realized then that the woman I had loved, really loved, was no longer mine. She was someone else's now. And with that realization came something I hadn't felt in years, a cold, deliberate clarity. I wouldn't let this go, not quietly, not without consequences. The fracture was no longer invisible. It was glaring, wide, undeniable. And I knew the coming days would define whether I would crumble under it or rise from it, stronger, sharper, and unrelenting. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them together. Her smile, his hand brushing hers, the way she leaned into him as if I didn't exist. It was worse than any slap, worse than any punch. The betrayal wasn't just physical. It was in every word she'd ever whispered, every promise she'd ever made that now felt like a lie. I began to follow her more often, tracking her movements like a detective obsessed. Each late meeting, each sudden trip to see a friend, I made a note. Each time she received a message in her car, I memorized the tone, the pauses, the patterns of how she typed. I became part shadow, part predator, lurking in the periphery of my own life. And yet I still hated what I felt. Watching her laugh with him, seeing her warmth directed elsewhere, stirred a sickness in my chest I couldn't swallow. Part of me wanted to confront her, yell, scream, collapse into tears. But another part, the part that had learned to endure, To wait, to plan, kept me silent. Patience, I realized, could be as sharp a weapon as anger. I began to imagine scenarios, not violent ones at first, though the thought flared occasionally. No, these were about revelation, about making her and him feel the full weight of what they had done. I wanted them to understand that nothing was hidden forever, that secrets had consequences. I wanted her to see the devastation in my eyes, the emptiness she had created. I watched their routines from a distance, learning the rhythm of their betrayal. Coffee shops on Monday mornings, late-night bars on Thursdays, whispered calls at odd hours. Every pattern I recorded, every detail memorized became fuel. I wasn't planning a confrontation yet. I was building a map, a strategy, a way to expose them when the time was right. But it wasn't all anger. There were moments when I caught myself remembering the woman I had loved, the life we had shared, and for a brief, sharp instant, I hoped. Maybe she could still come back. Maybe there was some shred of truth buried beneath all the lies. And each time that hope flickered, it died faster than it had appeared. Because every smile she offered to him, every whispered word, proved that chapter was closed. At home, I became meticulous. I saved messages, noticed patterns in her calls, checked receipts and notes she left carelessly. I turned my pain into observation, my heartbreak into precision. There was a clarity in that, a cold purpose that kept me awake long past midnight. One night I stood outside her apartment building, hidden in shadows, watching lights flicker behind curtains. I saw them together, her laughing at something he said, touching his arm like I had once done, like I was no longer allowed to. I clenched my fists and swallowed the urge to run in and scream. No, I thought, not yet. Let this linger. Let this burn. The spiral was complete. Betrayal had consumed every quiet moment, every memory, every plan. And in that darkness, I realized something dangerous. Patience and precision were more powerful than anger. They could wait. They could strike. And when the time came, nothing would be left unturned. The weeks passed like a slow burn. I went to work. I smiled at coworkers. I laughed at jokes, but inside, I was counting hours, memorizing movements, planning my next steps. Every lie she told, every detail she tried to hide, became ammunition. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was methodical, deliberate. Claire's texts became desperate. I didn't mean for this to happen. Please, we can fix this. I still love you. I read them and didn't reply. Silence was my weapon. I wanted her to feel the emptiness, the same hollow ache I felt every night. I wanted her to see that the man she had wronged wasn't broken, but he was watching, waiting. I started setting small traps, notes left in her apartment that weren't meant to be found, random photos she didn't realize were being captured, patterns she thought invisible now had witnesses, all stored in my mind and on my phone. Every detail, every slip, every shadow of deceit was cataloged. But as I planned, I also remembered. The nights we stayed up talking about everything and nothing, the mornings with coffee on the porch, the quiet intimacy that once defined us. The contrast burned like acid. I had to reconcile the memory of the woman I loved with the woman I saw now, someone I barely recognized, someone who had chosen another path. One night, I followed her to the hotel she met him at. I parked down the street, watching from the shadows. I wanted her to see me, but I stayed hidden. I wanted her to feel the weight of being watched, of being caught in lies that could no longer hide. I thought about confrontation, shouting, breaking things, forcing the truth out. But that would be messy, raw, uncontrolled. I didn't want messy. I wanted precise. I wanted her realization to be as sharp and deliberate as the betrayal had been. As I walked home that night, the plan was clear. I would expose everything, not in a fit of rage, not through violence, but with cold, undeniable proof. She would have no choice but to confront the truth, and I would be the one who handed it to her, watching as the illusion she built around herself collapsed. The fracture was no longer just in our relationship. It was in me too. The man I had been, the man I had loved her for, the man who trusted without question. But in the emptiness, I found clarity. I would not be broken. I would not be silenced. I would let justice, my own meticulous version of it, take its course. And when the moment came, she would understand what betrayal truly costs. The night had finally come. I didn't rush, didn't storm in with a wild heart. No, I moved with purpose, every step measured, every breath controlled. This wasn't about anger anymore. It was about clarity, about making them both face what they had done. The party was at a friend's apartment, casual, loud, full of laughter. Claire was there, dressed elegantly, her hair perfect, her smile radiant, like nothing had ever happened. I let her think she could escape, that I had forgotten. I waited, blending into the crowd, biding my time. When the moment felt right, I raised my glass, catching the attention of everyone in the room. Claire froze just for a second, and I saw the flicker of panic in her eyes. Funny thing about trust, I began, my voice calm, steady, carrying over the laughter. It takes years to build and seconds to destroy. All eyes turned toward us. Claire's smile faltered. I pulled out my phone and showed the messages, the photos, the receipts, everything meticulously collected over the past months. The room grew silent, the kind of silence that burns. Her face went pale. I saw the lie crumble in real time, the mask she had worn falling to the floor. Ethan tried to step forward to speak, but the weight of the evidence pinned him in place. This, I said, voice cold, precise, is what happens when deception becomes a lifestyle. Every secret, every betrayal, every stolen moment. You thought it would stay hidden, but the truth doesn't wait. It always comes out. The room was frozen, the tension palpable. Claire tried to speak, to reach me, but words failed her. For the first time, she was powerless, exposed. And in that exposure, I found a strange kind of relief. Not happiness, not satisfaction, but release. I set my glass down and stepped back. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to break anything. The evidence, the truth, and the quiet strength of my composure were enough. I left the party that night alone. The city streets were empty, cold, quiet. And for the first time in months, I breathed freely. The fracture had been confronted. The betrayal had been unveiled. And though the scars would remain, I knew I could finally begin again. Stronger, wiser, unbroken. Sometimes love ends not with forgiveness, but with truth. And sometimes surviving the truth is the only victory that matters.